Religion and spirituality continue to be an ongoing theme in my life. Ever since I was a kid, my parents were discovering where they fit in terms of religion. And then at some point in my younger years, I was passed around to different religions as they were trying to figure out where they belonged, and I never really found something that made sense. If anything, I started seeing more and more how none of this made sense, and especially the way that people were applying it. It just didn't make sense to me that people were using this for any sort of goodness in their life. They were kind of saying it, but not really doing it. And I saw that in the sort of Catholic world that I was surrounded by. I grew up in Northeast Philly, and there was a lot of Catholicism around, and a lot of contradiction, again, between what was being said and what was being done. I mentioned in the last episode about the victim consciousness and releasing that. Is that a part of my life involved being told a lot that I was special, but then contradictory behaviors that involved, being hit as a child a lot, and a lot of severe consequences. And a lot of those consequences ended up involving religion to try to almost force it into me in a lot of ways. I went to a Catholic high school because my parents were afraid that the public high school was too dangerous, and my older brother had experienced a knife being pulled on him, and they didn't want me having that experience. Understandably so. But I also felt ignored because I was put into a Catholic school, and I was very vocal about not liking religion. And so that was an ongoing frustration for me. And as a part of that frustration, I very much rebelled even further, and I hated my time in Catholic school, and really was frustrated by the culture as well. I showed up into Catholic school in for the first time experiencing a place where there was a predominantly white culture. I grew up in schools where there were kids being bussed in from all over the place. So I had Indian friends, Asian friends, uh, Middle Eastern friends, people from all over the place. And then I went into this Catholic school, and it was just all Caucasian kids. It was like 98%. And then I gravitated towards the few, one Russian girl, and another fellow Puerto Rican girl, and a couple other people that were, the pretty clear outcasts of that space. And really, for the first time, experiencing rampant bullying and pressure to conform to a culture. And that, I think, has pervaded and been a big part of my experience, and a lot of resentment that I carry towards middle class religious white kids. And I'm not going to disguise the prejudice that I feel there, and I have some frustrations that I'm reconciling with, because my stepkids are kind of a part of that culture too, so they kind of represent an aspect of that. And in a way, I feel like I'm always trying to figure out this balance of not putting that prejudice on them, and then also supporting their growth and development, so that they're not just defaulting to that culture and getting the worst out of it, but they are getting, the ability to think for themselves and to have actual faith. And so one of the themes that have come out of this religion and spirituality path for me has been this idea of having faith in faith versus having faith in spirituality, or having faith in God. And God could be a replacement for the universe or existence, or really just like, life itself, the ever present moment and motion of living and existence. And often God is interpreted as a personified person, right? And I think that affects the egos of a lot of people who are, especially men, who are relating themselves to God as a direct, personification of themselves. And I don't know if there's a correlation between the whole narcissism victim thing there, but I don't doubt that there's something to that. And so it really helps us to start thinking about religion and spirituality as something that is not necessarily about us being human, but it pervades all living things, including cells that pervade all existence. And so faith in faith is this very different idea of like praying for something, or wishing for something, or manifesting something and wanting it directly, and believing that if you just have enough faith that you will get it. That's not really what faith is. Like faith in God is really about, or rather, that is what faith is. But faith in God, or faith in the universe, or faith in existence. And I'm probably just going to use existence because faith in God is sort of like a, it's troublesome. Not a lot of people like the word God because it's has that religious connotation attached to it. So on the other side of this is this relationship to existence. It's that whatever is going to unfold needs to unfold. And then at the same time, I'm still a part of existence. So I'm making choices to try to make things happen that I want to happen. But if I'm trying to make things happen and it's not happening, there's probably a reason for that. It's not necessarily that, maybe I'm not meant for that. Maybe I don't have enough of the skills to actually make that happen. Maybe I don't have the karmic circumstances to be able to make that happen, right? I mean, I'm a 5'4" Puerto Rican male, 39 years old now. My birthday was on Friday. Happy birthday to me. And uh, I'm not going to be in the NFL. Like that's just not what's going to happen, right? So options change, and there are actual limits to what our experience is and can be. Some of the challenge that I feel and have experienced with sort of the religious white kid, middle class white kid that grew up in religion is that there's this certain feeling of being absolved of any actual sin or being absolved of any actual wrongdoing. And so there's almost this like, to me, maybe it's a reflection or a trigger of a certain kind of freedom that I wish I had, of a potential that I wish I had. And that, kind of highlights this sort of frustration in me, that it's perhaps a trigger and not just a frustration. Um, and so something I'm just kind of analyzing as I'm talking here. But just to say that out loud, because that is a part of me that is existing and needs attention. For a long time, I've repressed that part, especially as I've been going through the more recent years of trying to become, the kind of spiritual person that is just like, I want to be loving and I want to be open and I want to be welcoming of all people and all of that stuff. But in order to do that, I have to repress the parts of me that are angry, that are louder, that are pointing at specific people and saying, like, no, that's messed up. Don't do that. And that part of me is still banging at the door and saying, like, no, this is still you. And this has value here. This is some part of you that is worthy of attention. Right. And it's not necessarily to say that what I need to do is go on some sort of crusade, but that there's an underlying message in there. Like, what is the big picture thing that I'm looking for that really pervades all of this? And it really was in a Tim Fletcher video that I saw. It was about spiritual bypassing, where he talked about this difference between faith and faith versus faith in God or faith in existence. And that was big for me. And it's big for me seeing the way the sort of the world is right now, where there's a lot of religiosity. There's a lot of faith being put into what gets me what I want, not necessarily faith in existence, because faith in existence has nothing to do with you getting what you want. But, many people grew up through prosperity gospel and through a lot of situations uh, where, well, I've heard often that, people put their faith in abundance, and they say, like, there is abundance, and there is abundance. There's so much stuff that we have and we have access to and availability. But it's very different when you start to bring in these more recent concepts of privilege. I think people are talking about privilege in the sort of liberal sense, um, to talk about uh, the there's the idea of freedom of opportunity, right? But there definitely are different starting lines for different people. And so if you have had a faith in God and everything works in your favor, regardless of your religion, but it just tends to fit into the sort of Caucasian middle class person who is like, everything will work out. It's because, yeah, you have access to opportunity, you have greater access to jobs and network and a lineage and history where people are going to be more likely to take care of you and more likely to trust you. Like you don't necessarily have to think about uh, the nuances of how you dress and how you're going to be perceived if you're driving in the wrong neighborhood and getting pulled over, right? Like that's been my circumstance too. I have to think about that, especially as a Puerto Rican male. I'm more white presenting, but I can look, if I dress a certain way, if I wear all black with a black hoodie and I'm in a predominantly white neighborhood, I have been pulled over and asked, why am I in this neighborhood? You know, even if it's like related to like, you know, someone I know and someone I'm going to see, or a friend's house or my kid's house or something like that. You know, my stepkids, they live in the middle of nowhere and sort of small town America. And it worries me every time I go there. I'm like, am I dressed appropriately? Am I going to get pulled over uh, and questioned? You know, and my wife doesn't really have those concerns so much. I have to like talk to her about that and say like, no, this is stuff that I think about, and it's in my life and my experience. And so the challenge there is to not make that a thing that becomes a further pervasiveness about my victim complex or anything like that. But it is a fear that I experience. And so part of me talking here is really talking about parts work. This was a very long intro, but but really I wanted to talk about parts work. There are a couple different approaches to this. Personality Hacker does personality life path, which is going into the 8 cognitive functions of personality via Myers-Briggs and Carl Jung's cognitive functions, and looking at each cognitive function as an access point to a different part of ourselves. Perhaps there's a trigger there, or perhaps there is an under or overutilization of a certain function, a different part of the brain. There's also Richard Schwartz, who talks about parts work more directly. He talks about internal family systems, to where like our internal connections between ourselves, the part of ourselves that maybe represents our connection to our father or our mother or to our friends or to ourselves or to society, are these different parts that have conversations with each other. There's a critical one, there is a perhaps a lazy one, there's a judgmental one. Like there's just different parts of ourselves that are having these roundtable discussions. And then I also think about uh, well, Tim Fletcher's work covers some parts work a little bit. And then there's also Kim Barda, who does the stages model. Him and his sister, Terry O'Fallon, they both talk about the stages model, which is about person perspective. So it's, as we develop as a person, it's first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth person perspective, where first person is about ourselves. We only see what we can see. It's very concrete, and we don't have any sense that anyone else can see us. When we develop into second person perspective and want to make friends, we start to try to imagine what another person's perspective about us is. How do they view us? So we become more self-conscious, right? And that splits our ego into two. Into, I have to think about me and what I want, and now I have to think about them and what they want. And then there's a third person perspective where I think about who is observing our conversation now. So it's not just me and this one person talking to each other, but it's, if somebody else was observing, what would they be thinking about this conversation? And that expands awareness. So as we expand our awareness, we have more complex parts coming in that allow for us to think more complexly, to think about things in more complex ways, and to expand our worldview and awareness and the way that we see things. And then fourth person perspective starts to take the psychology into account and context. How was I? What was my cultural upbringing? Where did I come from? What was my background, and how did that impact? How does that impact the way that I witness this conversation? Right. So you, as the listener, could be someone from. I get listeners from all over the world, right? I've had listeners from Ukraine and from uh, Lebanon and from Egypt and from Morocco and Spain and Mexico and uh, all over the world, and been very grateful to have that, because I know there's just like little bits of potentially positive impact that my voice has, and I'm really grateful for that. And I don't want to take that for granted. I really, really don't. And so there's very much parts of me that know that that's valuable and know that I can appreciate that. And then there are parts of me that I'm a little afraid to unleash. And lately I've been getting to know those parts a little bit more, particularly this 14 to 16-year-old self that was between I was 14 in like 1999. So 1999 to 2001, right smack dab in middle school. And my stepdaughter's in middle school. So I'm like right in the center of being triggered by it all. But, getting to know this part of me that is, uh, that was into new metal, and I was just like this angry kid that, I listened to a lot of like Slipknot and Limp Bizkit and Incubus and stuff like that around that time period. And I've been re-listening to a lot of that music, and I spent the last 2 weeks or so setting up retro video games on my computer to really tap into what it was like to be that version of me again, because I think I repressed that part of me. I think at one point I realized that I remember saying to myself, okay, in order to get out of the house, in order to like permanently leave my house, I needed to play the game, which meant I needed to not rebel so much, and I needed to cooperate. And so I had to turn that part of me off. And I think I'm recognizing that literally as I'm talking, that part of me needed to step back in order for me to cooperate with my parents and to cooperate with society and to just get through this, right? I wasn't, I'm not a Gen Xer in the sense that culture enabled me to just walk out. The way things were set up at the time, it was not necessarily easy to just leave the house to get a job anywhere and make that happen. That the circumstance in my house in particular, was tough for me to leave. And I definitely could have just left. I think if I did not have some semblance of feeling stuck in my circumstance, I would have just left. But that's the generational difference too. Is like generational aspects of our psychology play a part in how we react to these things, right? How we react to our relationship to our upbringing and culture and parents and such. So being a millennial born in 1985, we were beginning to be a much more overprotected generation. And so there was this kind of weight of the culture really pushing for millennial success. And I very much just sort of gave into that. And I had this sense that, or at least this is the strategy that I took upon to not drop out because I didn't want to like lose access to an educational career. I decided to just buckle down, play the game, get through it, graduate high school, go through college, do the things that I needed to do to make things happen, take advantage of the situation, and then eventually get myself out of it. And so I'm getting to know this 14 to 16-year-old version of me that is kind of angry that I did that, that is definitely upset that I didn't keep fighting, that I didn't keep arguing at home, that I didn't keep standing up for myself, that I didn't just walk out, that I didn't just start my own life and do what I wanted to do. I remember there was a particular crossroad where I wanted to move in with a friend of mine, and my parents vehemently rejected that. And it's understandable that they would, and they didn't trust me to be able to make that work, and they didn't trust him, and that's also understandable that they didn't trust us to make that work. But I was desperate to get out, and being rejected in those ways, I remember feeling this sort of back and forth around, you know, feeling kind of trapped, and then feeling this sense of like, well, if I really wanted to do it, I could just do it. But I also knew that there was a lot of opportunity for me to stay, and I ultimately decided to stay. And I think that part of me that didn't want to stay, that crossroads of like the part of me that left, that didn't actually leave, is still mad at me. So, part of all this parts work is there's this video that I watched. I watched a long time ago, but then I recently watched again from Kim Barta on the Daily Evolver. He was talking about light and shadow at later stages of development. And, there's so many benefits of expanding our awareness and having these access to these different perspectives, right? To having first, second, third, fourth, fifth perspective. But at the same time, it expands our complexity. It expands the complexity of what we have to deal with in our heads, that there's more voices to reconcile and more things to talk about and more opportunities for us to wall something off, to repress or push away something. And so there's this idea of three different types of shadow. There's projections, introjections, and split ego states, right? So there's projections are basically unconscious agency. It's what I don't realize what I'm doing or saying and how it impacts others. And introjection is I don't unconscious receptivity. So I don't realize what I'm taking in and how it's affecting me. And then split ego states are when you're going through a developmental time period and there's a part of you that gets walled off, and then there's a later stage that becomes more of the dominant ego. And now, what makes sense, or what we would logically assume is the thing, is that the later worldview needs to be in charge, and that those earlier stages need to not come forward, right? The toddler, whiny, aggressive, take part of us should not be at the wheel, or the part of us that is the religious zealot should not be at the wheel, right? Anything that we might deem as bad should not be at the wheel, and it should be, quote unquote, our newer, higher spiritual self, right? When really it's not necessarily the case. That's just the spiritual ego taking over. That's just a different part of you playing dictator. That's still a spiritual person playing dictator, you know? And I think that's something really difficult for us as individuals and culturally to understand. You know, we put a lot of faith into somebody who is like calm and who is centered and open and accepting and speaks in an NPR soft voice. And there's very much like that part of me that is like the wise sage that wants to be at the forefront and wants to be the person that has all of the great advice and has all the smart things to say and wants to be the spiritual leader on stage answering questions and telling you how to live your life, right? But like I can hear that other part of me, that 16-year-old self screaming at me like, who the F are you? Like, what are you doing, man? Like, like who do you think you are? Like, you know, you're being a hypocrite. Like, you don't have your shit together, you know. Who are you to tell people how to live their life? And while it's easy to see that side as just like the judgmental person, it is someone that has a seat at the table. It's like the the round table of different perspectives. And at some point, yes, it makes sense that there's a hierarchy. It makes sense that we want to welcome in all voices and make it so that our still calm spiritual self is the one in charge. But at some point, we have to listen to all of those other voices and say, like, what value do you bring here? What are you trying to say? What does the 16-year-old self think about the 4-year-old self? What does the 4-year-old self think about the 39-year-old self, right? um, and I can almost feel myself flip into these different states at times. Like I flip into the 4-year-old self when I'm just being kind of playful and ridiculous. And, you know, I'm just like, I just want to eat stuff and I just want to laugh and make a mess, you know, and then I can feel the older version of me that is the adult that is trying to be tidy and organized and professional, saying like, no, 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 we don't have time for that. We don't have time to play video games. We don't have time. Like our wife is going to leave us if we're just being ridiculous all the time, right? And especially that 14 to 16-year-old self that is incredibly insecure about girls, you know, and that's the perspective of the 14-year-old self, is thinking about women as girls. um, you know, it's like it's judgmental about myself. It's judgmental about my viability as a partner, romantically, sexually, whether or not I'm fun or interesting. And that part needs some encouragement, and it needs to grow up in the sense that when I'm going through all of this victim consciousness work and I'm talking about it, I am largely talking to that part who decided that I wasn't viable, who decided that I wasn't worth loving. That no, that part is very much worth loving. Like there's so much great music that we appreciate. There's so much wisdom in being rebellious to religion. And I understand it now because what I see is that what that part of me saw was this instinct for what is happening now, which is that a lot of people are putting faith in faith, but not putting faith in God. And I was mad because they were just not doing religion correctly. Like, I was mad that I went to this Catholic school and there were all these like perverted drug using kids that would basically be nice and kind in front of their parents or at the church, or even like talk shit to their mom. You know, it's like the joke about the kid that would just be like, "Shut up, mom." It's like, if I ever told my mom to shut up, she would kick my ass. Are you kidding me? Right? So that never made sense to me to witness that. So there's like something off there. And I see that in my stepkids sometimes. I'm like, there's something off there that is not necessarily that something we did, because we don't have them all the time. And I'm not even saying it's something that their other parents did. This is not a blaming co-parenting thing, but they're in the religion, and that there's something in that that is off. There is a virus in there that is messing things up. And you see that in the manifestation of increased white nationalism and increased relationship uh, to overvaluing money and that sort of stuff, right? Again, my prejudice is showing, and of course, like, I don't mean to like trigger you if you're listening to this and feeling defensive. I'm only sharing my perspective, but it's not even really my opinion. I'm not trying to say that there's anything wrong with people or anything wrong with what's happening. If anything, faith in everything that's unfolding is like, yeah, that's what also needs to happen right now. Something is needing to be let go of, or needing to be worked out, or needing to play out in order to resolve something that's obviously not been good for the culture. And you know, I'm not the one to necessarily say what needs to happen or doesn't need to happen or anything like that, but I have my experience with it and I have my perspective on it. And I do see that if there are things that I would prefer to improve, to change for everybody, for them as well, in terms of having compassion for an experience that is effectively built on a lack of trust. You know, not having faith, not having proper faith in existence is a lack of trust that pervades conspiracy theories, that pervades this lack of trust in your fellow American and your fellow person, or whoever you're with. And we see that around the world as well, continuing. Really, like, I don't see much people talking about uh, truly what faith is. There's just like muddied waters about like religion has lost its spiritual essence, and people are still doing the things that seem spiritual because they're religious, but they're missing the essence, if that makes sense. So, I mean, I think it's worth talking about, and I don't necessarily want to be in a place of being preachy about it in a collective sense. Like, I'm not going to get on a high tower or a soapbox and change the world. This is not a crusade that I'm on, but I do feel like it's worth assessing if you're someone that's listened to me and listened to this podcast and has your own relationship to faith and religion. I think it's just at least worth assessing if you do feel like you have faith in faith, or you have faith in God, or you have faith in existence. You know, and it's really just trust. And it's a lot of hard work. I don't think it's very easy for anyone to just have faith in things unfolding as they need to. You know, a lot of people end up deconstructing from religion when they lose a family member, because they believe that if they have faith in their religion, that everything's just going to work out the way it's supposed to. Like, everyone's that I love is going to live forever. No random accident's going to happen. No babies are going to die. Like, that, the idealism of this all is that everything's going to happen the way that I need it to happen, or I want it to happen, to feel safe, to feel a sense of certainty or safety or insecurity. And the world just doesn't work that way. And I think actual faith is not necessarily about saying that the world needs to be a specific way. It's seeing the world as it is and trusting that it is the way it is. I wouldn't say for a reason, but because it is. And my ability to see it for what it is allows me to be more adaptable as a person. The difference is, like, kind of what I talked about in past episodes also, is is this idea of submission versus surrender, right? Submitting to a religion or to an ideal is to say that if I just give up my whole self to this thing, then my life is going to be transformed. It's like giving yourself away to a cult. It's to a cult leader and saying, like, well, if you just submit your full understanding, your full thought experience, your feeling experience, even your location, where you live, how you cooperate, how you operate, who you cooperate and live with, and you give me all your money or you give me your body, that your life will just work out the way that it's supposed to. Whereas surrender is just it's a trust, but it's not an inactivity. You are still responsible as a human being to be a part of existence. You are a part of it all. You are, I think that's what people say when they're using that term, like we are God or I am God. Um, I don't think I don't think that's helpful to think of it that way. I think it's really just saying that you have agency and you are a person that are still making decisions, right? There's that ongoing story. There's like the religious story about a flood that happened, and there are people sitting on a rooftop, and a boat comes, and the person's basically saying, like, you know, it's okay. I'm not going to get on. I'm not going to get on the boat. God will take care of me. All right, and the boat went on. Another boat came by, and they were like, "Hey, get on the boat." And they're like, "No, no, no, it's okay. God will take care of me. I'll be okay." And then the boat went on. And then like a helicopter comes through, and they're like, "Come on, get on the ladder. Come on, let's get you out of here." And then they said, "No, it's okay. God will take care of me." And then the waters kept rising, and they ended up drowning. They went up to the pearly gates. They talked to, I think it's Peter or somebody like that, and they were like, "Hey, I ended up dying. I put all of my faith in God, and I still died." And they were like, "Well, we sent you two boats and a helicopter. You didn't get on, so them's the natural consequences." That's not the way the the story was worded, uh, but that sort of pervades the general idea, right? That like putting your faith in faith and saying, it's if I don't do anything, if I just sit here, God will swoop me up and save me. Literally, something will just grab me by happenstance and take me out of this circumstance and fix my life, right? And that is faith in faith. You're not putting faith in God, you're putting faith in faith. Putting faith in God is saying, I'm aware of the circumstance I'm in. I see the opportunity in front of me that there's a boat. I'm going to get in it. That is what has been provided. That is the opportunity for me to take to, continue living my life. And so that is faith in existence. That is faith that, yes, I had faith that something will come and help me. But then when it's time, I still have to take action. I have to move my muscles. I have to move my body. I have to participate. And it's the results of my participation that ultimately lead to, whatever prosperity actually means for me. And that could mean just living to another day. It could be, sharing an idea or putting your voice out there. And I think for me, that's some of what I'm learning. I'm constantly throttling myself on how much I share on this podcast or on social media or the type of work I do. I'm always thinking like, what am I supposed to be doing right now? And I end up sort of locked in this place of sitting around almost waiting for the idea to just hit me. And it's like, no, just get into action. You have an idea, talk about it. Just put it on the podcast. Just say what you're going to say, start talking and see what happens and see how that comes forward. And don't worry about the impact. You're playing the game, right? And so this is a playful experience. I like explaining stuff. But for me, it really just hit me today. I think I was doing a little bit of Gene Key's research too, and a bunch of stuff just sort of cobbled together where it was like, yeah, you know what? You should talk more about your relationship to religion and your relationship to spirituality, because as much as I've always identified as an atheist, and I don't identify as an atheist now, there's the term non-theist. I think I would identify as that, I guess. But I've always been a bit of an accidental Buddhist as well. It's just these principles of the idea that, like, I don't personify God as a person. It's not even flipping it and trying to say, like, oh, my goddess, like, that sounds stupid too, in my opinion. I think it's just not personifying it. It's just the essence of, it's like the force. It's, you know, and I like that idea of the force actually, because in Star Wars, the force is not something that happens to someone. You know, they don't have faith in the force in terms of saying like, if I just sit here, the force is going to make life happen for me, but that the force is manipulatable. And I think that's an actual closer idea to God than anything I can think of personally. Um, that's really right there in our pop culture. It's this idea that not necessarily like telekinesis and moving things, but it's that if I participate in existence, I develop mastery, I develop skills, I develop greater connection to essence, then I can be aware of opportunities. In a lot of ways, spiritual connection is really about highly attuning the body, and it's attuning to our emotions, it's attuning to our thought experience, where we get an opportunity for things to get quiet. And in that quiet, we can become more attuned to greater threads of existence, greater opportunities. So it's like when the boat is coming to pick someone up from the flooded plain or the neighborhood, that you are attuned to that opportunity and you can take that opportunity, right? So being attuned to those opportunities is part of spiritual presence as well. Or it could be attuned to ideas. Just having this notion that genius, or the ability for genius to visit you, right? Um, Liz Gilbert talks about this in her book, Big Magic, where she pulled it from some other story. But this idea that genius is something that visits you. And there's two lessons there. It's first of all, being open and attuned to allow for genius to come visit you. In the sense of me as an INTP in the Myers-Briggs system, it's using my extroverted intuition and getting myself into situations where I'm talking or I'm communicating or I'm trying some sort of creative action to allow for that genius to visit me. That's the way the mechanism opens to allow genius to visit. That's the beacon, that's the smoke screen or whatever, the smoke signal. And then for others, introverted intuition, people need to just sort of be more, close their eyes, or they need to be in some sort of flow to allow for themselves to let their own mind feed them patterns about how it all works. And so, regardless of how genius might visit you, it's creating the circumstances and the high attunement to kind of get all the gunk out of your way, to clear out some shadow work, to get through some of the stuff in your past, to work with a therapist, to, you know, to go to the gym, to do the push-ups, to drink water, to take care of your body, and to not inundate yourself with social media so much, and to let your mind think, so that genius can visit you. And it's not even just the intuitive cognitive functions, but it's just, it's thinking, it's feeling, it's being attuned to your heart space and your gut that's telling you, I feel like a boundary's been crossed right now and I'm angry and I need to fix this. Or I'm angry all the time and it means I probably have too many boundaries, that I feel like my boundaries are constantly being crossed. Or that I'm in my head so much and that I'm really living in a place of fear constantly. And if I let some of those things go and I'm able to tune to my experience, then I can allow greater opportunity for genius, for direction, for inspiration, for motivation to hit me, to impact me, and to be imbued with spirit, with essence, with the force, with existence, with you know, some alignment of brain cells, body cells, gut cells, like all of those things to lead me into what to do next. And in that sense, it's also taking that opportunity. So yes, there is the literal boat, but then there's also the conceptual one where it's like, I have the opportunity to speak on social media, so let me take it. I have the opportunity to make graphics and put them on Canva, so let me try it. Let me take it. And so these open doorways, you can just stare at them and say like, okay, well, I would love for someone to reach their hand in and pull me through the portal, or you can step in and try it and try something and see how it all works out for yourself and go forward. I mean, if you've ever been through a divorce or a major life change of some kind. Maybe you lost a family member or a friend or a job or anything where your life just turned unexpectedly. You know, you're often put into a situation where you have to step through. If you don't step through, things are just going to get awful and worse. And I believe that we're in a space right now where faith and faith is this idea that people are going to come save you. It is kind of connected to the victim complex in the sense that someone is going to, fix the economy. Someone's going to come in and change all of the workplace systems so that I will never be triggered ever again. Or we'll set all these rules in place in the workplace that I work so that nobody will ever upset me, or nobody will ever get in conflict, or I don't have to say hi to anybody, or I don't have to use any kind of effort to, interface with the actualities of existence, that I can social engineer life to my liking. And, it's just that to me speaks and screams a big picture lack of faith and a big picture lack of trust in existence and the way things are going to unfold. I mean, we're a month away as of this recording. We're about a month or so away from the presidential election in the United States. And I think from a generational theory standpoint, it's going to have a major impact in how things happen next. However, on an individual level, most of the things that are going to impact us as people, as an individual, are going to be things that we have the opportunity to be adaptable to. Even if there are big picture increasing conflicts around the world, perhaps conscriptions and drafts and stuff like that, whatever circumstance we find ourselves in, that we are still someone that can awaken ourselves and become attuned to opportunity, to genius coming to visit us, to step into the moment, whatever the moment is, right? And we could spend a lot of time mourning the moment that passed, mourning the opportunities. And I think we should. I think we should feel that sadness because we have ideals and we have expectations for how things are supposed to go. But if we don't get good at feeling that sadness, at grieving those losses, then we can't adapt to what's coming next. So whatever the case may be, whether or not the president that gets elected saves you from your woes in some way, shape, or form, you're still going to be here. You're still most likely going to be alive and being a part of life. So are you going to sit on your hands for the next 4 years and wait for the next life raft and then say like, you know what, I'm going to wait for the next one? Or are you going to say that, actually I'm going to look around and notice that there are opportunities here that I can jump into, things that I can take advantage of or be a part of, whether that's, and I'm not even just talking in the, in the professional sense. I think a lot of people get very gung ho about it and apply it to like, yeah, man, you got to like buck up and do things and make a name for yourself. I'm talking about also opportunities for rest and for feeling sadness and for connecting with your loved ones and perhaps easing off of the gas pedal. That might be an opportunity as well. There might be an opportunity for you to use paid time off that you haven't used, to go on a vacation you haven't gone on, to work on a project that is fun, to play video games because for some reason you've assumed I've assumed that playing video games makes me a loser and I'm going to be seen as this like smelly idiot that is just a lazy dad or husband that's not involved in just ignoring people and playing video games and living my life. Like, no, I'm allowed to enjoy myself and I actually get recharged from that enjoyment. So that's an opportunity. And so leaning into that as well, it's just having faith that also whatever sensations you're having, there's a reason for them. And I don't necessarily mean a why. I think part of the faith and faith is that we get caught up in the why. That's why conspiracy theories happen. That's why like all of these judgments happen about like why things are happening. I think we should be looking at the what. What is happening? What am I feeling? What's the sensation in my body? What are the opportunities? What's in front of me? And I think if I'm attuning to what I'm feeling right now, it's like I am feeling pretty tired. Actually, I was feeling inspired and I'm towards the end of doing this podcast, and now I'm feeling pretty tired, and I think I want to lay down. So I'm going to do that, and there is a signal there, and then at some point I feel a recharge, and I'm like, okay, let me get out of bed. What's next? What needs to be done, or what can I do? And it's also, what is my energy level? What am I capable of? What are my skills? It's asking a lot of what questions, I think, gets us into the attunement and the ability to operate and have agency to step into those opportunities, to have greater faith in life and our ability to trust in life and how it unfolds, because we are able to adapt to however life unfolds, and we have less judgment on how it should unfold. There's so many people I've heard lately saying, like, this should not happen. This person should be allowed to do this. I was watching Survivor, and then I watched this. I saw an article that said, like, people should be able to steal rice for their health. It's like, that's the point of the show. That's what they signed up for, is to, like, have a lack of resource and then try to survive it, and also deal with the social dynamics, and to do the obstacle courses with little food and little resources. That's part of the game. And the trying to control the game is a lack of faith. Trying to change the circumstance, trying to put in the cheat codes is is saying you don't have faith in the situation, and that you're not willing to play the game. You're not willing to play the game as it is, and assuming that you can always negotiate the rules of life and put the game in your favor. The game's just not going to be in your favor. Find the games that are fair to you, but, like, ultimately life is fair because it's not fair. you know? And so it's like playing the game of life and existence, and just and finding joy in the process of it. That's the other part of the what thing, or the genius of it all, is like, the idealisms we get attached to are usually ideals about outcomes, and we cannot guarantee certain outcomes. We could put work towards those and try to make those happen, but there's no guarantee. And our happiness isn't necessarily predicated on outcomes. If we put all of our happiness on outcomes, if we watch every baseball or football game and we're only happy if our team wins, then, like, what's the point of watching it at all? You might as well just look at the score at the end. Like, enjoy the process, enjoy the game, look at, root for people, cheer for what's going right, look at the opportunities, look at the possibilities, and even in the things that are going wrong, the things that are happening in the world that are obviously negative to so many people, where is the actual long-term benefit of that? What are we working through? What are we releasing? I think some of it has to do a lot with the victim consciousness and releasing a lot of ideals, because a lot of the world is a lot of people fighting about ideals, what belongs to them, where we're supposed to be going, what we're supposed to look like as a country, what belongs to me, what relationships are we supposed to have, whether or not I should or shouldn't feel my sadness, whether or not certain people should or shouldn't be in charge. It's like all of these ideals are coming to a head, and it's got to play out. And in a way, there's a certain beauty to that, even if there's going to be a lot of really complex stuff in between it all. But you, as a person, as an individual who is able to be somewhat attuned to all of that, but not inundate yourself with that, to continue to write in your journal, or to drink water, to eat food, to hug your loved ones, to take a breath, to meditate or do yoga or exercise in whatever way you want to exercise, play video games, relax, watch movies, do some of your work, have a sense of purpose, and feel connected, feel great pleasure, and do all of the things that, like, make you human. Just keep doing those, and you're living the game of life, and you're expanding your ability to adapt to whatever coming situation needs to come and needs to happen. So um, there's a part of me feels like there's something in my brain that I haven't quite grabbed yet that I needed to say, but that's okay. I think I've come to the end of this idea that, mostly as a quick recap, it's about faith in existence, not so much faith in faith. That faith in faith is looking at the boat that's coming here to rescue you and saying like, no, 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 God's going to come and take care of me. But like, you're missing the opportunity. You're missing what's right in front of you. You're missing the faith of it all, like the actual faith in the universe that, you know, you also need to step in. You are a part of it all. You are a player in the game. And I don't mean the whole like NPC thing. I think that's just like such garbage terminology. I think that's such a, in the same way that narcissism and victim is such a co-opted term, I feel like NPC is another term for victim. That's like this sort of like weaponized terminology, right? If anything, in a lot of these video games, you can see like the NPC getting on the boat because they're just following the script and they're just doing what they're supposed to do. And sometimes you're supposed to just surrender to the script and do what you're supposed to do, you know? So the other side of that submission thing that I talked about is rigidity, right? And there's this paradox of like sitting on the roof, not taking the boat, is both rigid and lacking faith at the same time. it's it's lacking attunement to the moment, and it's very rigid, very rigidly holding on to faith. It's rigidly holding on to a lucky rabbit's foot, you know, instead of, and really like faith being something that's going to happen to me versus something I need to step into. And ultimately it comes down to agency and personal responsibility and stepping into your life, whatever that means. So I hope that helps. It helped me even to express and work through some of this and get some clarity of like how I can be supportive to you, regardless of what part of the world you're dealing with. If you're dealing with some really intense stuff, I wish you luck and send you all the best. Remember that the agency is yours. So whatever it is you need, you got to find it. Even if that means getting help, you need to make the connection to the person that's going to help you and then get the help that way. You know, no one's going to come see your sadness or see your troubles and just automatically come save you. As much as there are a lot of people in the world that do that, you know, sometimes those people have hidden agendas, you know, so be careful of that. People take advantage of people that just put all of their faith in faith, and then they become populist leaders who lead a bunch of people who are desperate and not willing to take their own agency to make their life work, right? But you're not that. You're a person who is taking the reins in your life, who is getting the proper rest, who is enjoying the moments that you're in, that's playing the game and not just looking at the final score. Because again, if you do that with life today, you might as well just die and read your own memoir. Like, you're in it. Enjoy the process. Anyway, much love. My name is Christian Rivera, aka C Note. You can subscribe over at dopamine.substack.com and get this directly into your inbox. Sometimes I'll write notes separately as well when I'm in a writing mode. Right now I'm in a podcast mode. And if you're following on YouTube, definitely do the same. Go to dopamine.substack.com and subscribe and continue to follow this work, however it continues to manifest. Anyway, I appreciate you. Much love to you and yours and your family and all of those that are connected to you. And yeah, just keep on keeping on. Appreciate you. Later.